So I'll just briefly.
As I was saying, I was asking you interviews, and you were saying, firstly, you promised to record the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Seems it's happening.
And we agreed to do it in English because I sound smarter, but we have been talking in Estonian. And you said that even though you have your organization is not controlled by any political party, you're more like a Catholic Christian, a Catholic conservative group. You have been critical of immigrants, but you're strongly opposed to white nationalism, and you're an anti-racist platform, right? And you've made that very, very clear to me, right? And you agree with those?
Pretty much it. I'm personally not a member of the Catholic Church. I'm just I recently joined this Objective portal, and I've been working there for like 2 months. So, but I am not personally Christian, but we're more like, we have a general like conservative tilt. So it's not necessary to be definitely a member of the church to be a member of Objective.
All right. Yeah. I had a Christian upbringing myself, right? So yeah, I'm for that, though not Catholic, Anglican upbringing, right?
Mm.
Okay, so what questions do you want to ask me?
Just to start, maybe I've read several of your interviews in the Estonian press as well as in the UK press, your articles, and I just wanted to ask that you've taken the stance that you are not the supporter of Black Lives Matter. But I understand it's simply because you see the movement as being like, let's say, co-opted by certain interests, or not being actually in the interests of Black people. But how would you yourself describe it?
Well, that's right. I mean, the actual words "Black Lives Matter," I don't think anyone can say they don't support that. But it should really be Black Lives Matter as well, or Black Lives Matter too, right? Right, and so it's a bit of bad marketing, right? But the movement is not what it appears. It appears to be selling one thing, but it's selling something else, right? It's a classic bait and switch, right? So they start off by saying we're for stopping police brutality, but then they start to tell you about, and we also have to destroy Israel, right? Which is not something that I think most Black people would want to sign up to, right? And if you ask me, well, where am I getting this? Well, I'm getting it from the Washington Post and from the Jerusalem Times, right? These are reputable news organizations, even if there's any news organizations you believe that are clearly saying, this is a group that is fundamentally anti-Semitic, right? Which is the main reason why I oppose them.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of talk also about there being very interesting financing behind Black Lives Matter. So they get very, very large amount of grants in the US and so on. In Estonia, of course, the movement is basically rudimentary. It doesn't exist. It's just some internet activists, perhaps. But in the UK, do you have any background information on who is actually funding these people?
I don't know that. I really don't know. All I do know is that when they came to UK initially 4 years ago, people saw through it and it failed, right? It failed dismally, right? And now they're back with a vengeance, right? And actually, there are people who are going on the demonstrations who want to believe in Black Lives Matter, but want to distance themselves from the movement because they understand the movement is a Trojan horse to something that's not related to Black Lives Matter at all.
All right. But that's actually an interesting point that there could be a sort of non-ideological similar movement, just simply, protesting police brutality, protesting racism that diverges from Black Lives Matter. But is there anything like this in the UK, like an alternative organization?
Well, I don't know, right? Because I haven't been out on the protests. All I know is that some of the people who've been out on the protests have distanced themselves from the movement itself. They've just been out protesting, and they specifically are unhappy about specific issues, right? Police aggression in the US, but also in the UK, and also they feel that they don't have as many opportunities in life, and they're also unhappy with Britain's colonial past, right? And which is another issue. They're pulling down statues. They're rioting. So it's very amorphous at the time. Maybe a movement will emerge later, but at the moment, it's not it's not clear what they want. They're angry about something. Maybe it's because they've been locked up indoors for months, and it's
Yeah,
summer, right?
exactly.
Yeah. So there's that element, and then there are in the United States, not so much in Britain, but in the United States, there are just criminals who are out there looting, right? Yeah, as well, smashing up stores and stealing sneakers, and they're just looters, right? And then using the opportunity to steal stuff.
Yeah, I've seen some videos that are quite like disturbing. I saw one from the Seattle protest where an activist was like drawing parallels with the French Revolution and like saying that if you people won't cooperate with us, then the head chopping will begin. So there's clearly this sort of like tendency to extreme left agenda inside the movement. And I've also heard that there are like Antifa people who are perhaps like attempting to co-opt this police brutality, this opposition to police brutality, and to like channel it to some different ends. Channel it perhaps to.
That's what Antifa or have always done. They've always been nasty people. And what people forget, and I wrote about this once in the Estonian press, you can find this, is that a lot of the people on the far left who are like Antifa, and a lot of people on the far right, who would be, I guess, EKRE and Estonia, are the same people. I mean, I don't mean in an abstract sense. I mean literally so, right? Because I grew up with this, where you'd have someone who's really, really far left, and then they will switch and become far right, and then go after their former far right friends, or you'll get someone on the far right who will switch and then become far left and become Antifa and start going after their former far right friends, right? But they've still got the same violence and anger inside of them. And often what you find is that the anger and the violence inside of them has got nothing to do with what's going on in the wider world. It's from their upbringing, right? There's this film called This Is England, which shows this, where you've got this violent far right skinhead, and he brutally beats this teenage black boy. But the reason why he beats him, it's very clear, isn't because he's black. It's because the boy has had a happy upbringing, which this skinhead didn't have, right? And he could have he feels later on, he acknowledges that, and he feels guilty about what he did, right? And a lot of these Antifa people who are violently, have had unhappy upbringings, and a lot of the violent people on the right have also had unhappy upbringings, and they know each other. They know each other personally, right? They grow up in the same neighborhoods, right? And they meet each other in stores, and this is true in Estonia, not just in the US or in the UK. I grew up with people like this, right? So I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for me also personally, I have been involved in the past with like left-wing people. And I also noticed this tendency that a lot of the most aggressive anti-fascist characters, for instance, in the Italian scene, were actually former Nazi punks. So they had like switched very rapidly to the other side of it. And of course, I mean, I can see something like that personally in myself also, since I used to be left-wing and now I'm right-wing. And so there is this tendency, I admitted it in myself also, that if you're drawn to maybe non-status quo type of thinking, there is this possibility of switching, actually. But I hope I wasn't an extremist when I was left-wing, and I hope I'm not extremist now. But there is something to it.
I know I'm not extremist, and I know my politics hasn't changed. It's the world that's changed, right? Where things that were unthinkable a few years ago have become, mainstream. I mean, it used to be, for example, that men are men and women are women. It was very clear. Now, if you so much as suggest that sex is a real thing, you get cancelled, as J.K. Rowling is being cancelled, right? For Christ's sake, So, if you have a moderate position or a reasonable thing, saying, well, there's a difference between men and women and it's biological, then suddenly you become, demonized. So my politics haven't really changed that much. I think the world has changed, right? And so I find myself kind of centerish, But that's meant that I ended up standing for the Brexit Party, not because I'm an extremist, and I don't think the Brexit Party is an extremist, but because I thought that people voted for it, and the democratic will of the British people should be respected, and it wasn't being respected. That was the number one reason why I decided to do that.
Mm. Well, yeah, I agree. I have the same trajectory, maybe that I don't even think I have changed my own views so much, but the sort of the frame has shifted so rapidly and so drastically. I wanted to ask you also about the Estonian liberal scene, so to speak. So you had recently on Facebook many liberal types from Estonia who became or started like lecturing you on the proper attitude towards racism and Black Lives Matter. So how do you see this as a black man yourself, like a white Estonian liberals just lecturing you on these subjects?
Well, they're wrong. I mean, and it doesn't mean I'm always right, but they're wrong, and they weren't fair. They weren't nice. They were really aggressive and unpleasant. Some of them weren't. But I thought the points I made were fair, and the point I made was that the Estonian police are not like that. They would never do something like that. I've had a lot of dealings with the Estonian police, more than most people. Some of them haven't been very pleasant, and I don't accept that what happened to George Floyd could happen in Estonia, right? And indeed, some of the other black people have said the same. They've had very much better dealings with the Estonian police than I have had. Right? One of them said to me, his dealings with the Estonian police have been very good. They've been very nice to him. So I think somebody put it very, very well. Is the Estonian police are like a mirror, right? They reflect back what you do to them. So if you're unpleasant to them, they'll be unpleasant to you. But if you're nice to them, then they'll be nice to you. Right, and I found that all I need to do if a policeman approaches you is just say a few words to him in Estonia, and their demeanor completely changes. Right, That's it. Yeah, that's all you need to do. Right. And I really do think that the focus should be on the on police brutality, because it is here, right? And if that's not happening, then why is there a march? Especially when there's a disease. It used to be the case that if you wanted to kill someone, you'd have to have a gun or a knife or a rock or something. But now, if you want to kill someone, all you need to do is breathe on them, right? Right. So why are people out, breathing on each other, potentially killing each other, um, um, in public? Why are they doing that?
Yeah, and we're seeing that in the United States, like the disease rates have started to pick up again.
Yeah,
most probably due to the large protests. So it's again this is sort of like a absolutely paradoxical thing where democratic governors were saying like 2 months ago, everybody has to stay home. If you go outside, you're killing people, and now they are like protesting. They have joined the protest marches themselves, while there are actually still standing orders to, like the lockdown orders are still in force, but they are themselves violating their own orders. So it's like
exactly
absurd.
Yeah, it was exact. It was said in Estonia. Well, it was a car protest. Well, it was a car protest for those people who can afford cars, right?
Yeah.
But everybody. So the poorer people, which in Estonia, most of the black population are students, and so they actually can't afford cars. So they are out on the streets, putting themselves in danger, whereas the richer whites are in their cars, safe and comfortable. A demonstration that was supposed to be inclusive was very non-inclusive at all. It wasn't inclusive at all. Right. So, and I don't think anybody thought of that. As well, I know nobody did. Right. So, yeah. I felt people should stay home and stay safe, and I was surprised that the message that I was actually trying to put out there, I thought it was obvious, right? Because people would ask me, why are you against this demonstration, don't we have a right to protest? And I'd say, well, yeah, under normal circumstances, but these are not normal circumstances. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, well, disease. And they were like, oh, I didn't think of that. I had quite a few people um, 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 message me that, right. I had that dialogue, and if anyone challenges it on me, I can send them the screenshots of it happened a few times, right. And people really weren't thinking about their own safety or the safety of other people when they were going out, right, and demonstrating on the streets, and they're not thinking about it here, right, in the UK, and they're not thinking about it in America, and that's I would have thought that was so obvious I wouldn't have to say it, but apparently I did. Right.
Yeah, there's this amazing phenomenon where leading people who were like public health experts and who were saying during the corona crisis that it's absolutely essential to stay home are now saying that systemic racism is also a pandemic. So you have to weigh the corona deaths against the systemic racism deaths. And this kind of absolutely absurd rhetoric coming from top level Harvard people and people like that. So it's quite amazing to see. But yeah, as I watched the videos and the pictures of the local protest, I had to see that most of the people were young white girls, essentially. So people who I guess are on Twitter or on TikTok, they're sharing these global memes and petitions and whatever. And yeah, my reaction, as I understand your reaction, was that these people should actually look at what problems we have here in Estonia. Which are for instance, I don't know, deforestation problem, big issue for Estonia. Whatever you can find. But why is there this global?
I think I don't know, 60,000 people, 60,000 children living in absolute poverty in Estonia. Why aren't they campaigning for that to stop that? Yeah, that's a big problem, and that obviously is going to get worse with this recession. Right. So yeah, there are lots of problems that Estonia has, as every country
has. Maybe a word or two about your own situation. So you have said that you actually left Estonia since you felt that after EKRE got into government, that the political situation was too bad for you to continue as a publicist in Estonia. So can you expand on that a bit? Did you get any direct threats or whatever? Or?
No, not direct threats. I mean, it really does boil down to one man, which is Jüri Ratas, the prime minister. He promised the country and me personally that he wouldn't do a deal with EKRE, and he did, right? And that made it very difficult for me to stay in the country. Under those circumstances, right? Because there really is no place. I felt that I'd outstayed my welcome, so I had to leave, and I plan to come back someday, but not while this coalition is in power. And I don't think this coalition will stay in power forever, right? Because coalitions never do. So we'll see what happens. I'm in the UK. I'm happy here. I miss my family, but a lot of people are going through very difficult times. Lots of people have lost their jobs, so I don't want to complain about my situation. I mean, I'm working, and so.
But your family is actually in Estonia.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have any plans of relocating them or?
Well, I can't because of the virus. I can't even. Oh. I can't fly. Right? They can't fly and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So, no, it's the virus has stopped everything. I mean, I haven't been to Estonia in 6 months.
Okay, but let me just expand on this. That on the one hand, you have said that police racism is not a problem in Estonia, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. But do you actually see any increase, generally speaking, in racism? Let's just leave maybe the one person, Martin Helme's person aside here. Do you see a general increase in racism due to the new government, or is it just hypothetical at this point?
I think it's more of an issue that the issue is more on people's minds, right? In a way that it wasn't when when I went there. I mean, initially, when I went to Estonia, I'm actually not that interested in identity politics. I actually don't like it, and it's not really what I talk about or think about in my personal life. And if you knew me personally, you'd realize immediately, oh, actually, this guy doesn't really care that much about race. He talks about other things. He's into science fiction or whatever it is he's into. I'm not very interested in that. But what's happened is in the last 4 years, as political correctness and identity politics has become more and more, it's been something that I can't avoid, right? Or something that everybody is focused on in a way that they weren't 4 or 5 years ago. So that's really the issue, right? Right, that people are more concerned with it, either they're one way or the other, than they were 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? Not just in Estonia, but in the world, right? Right. So that's the way I would answer that question.
Yeah, personally also I find it like distasteful to talk about race like this all the time. I mean, it's I feel like when I'm talking about these issues, I constantly feel like am I being racist now? I'm using these terms like referring to people as black or white or whatever, but I feel like the other side, so to speak, like the Black Lives Matter side, is like forcing this rhetoric or this frame onto me. Like I have to work inside this frame. So I
Well,
feel it's distasteful, really.
yeah, well, I mean, it's happening from both sides. Right? I mean, people have forgotten that um, um, 10 years ago, EKRE didn't even exist. There was no such thing. And it was interesting that Estonia was one of the few countries in Europe which didn't have um, a right-wing populist party at all. Right? Whereas in the UK, we had two. We had UKIP, which is a right-wing populist party in the proper sense, and we had the British Nationalist Party, which is a white nationalist party. Now, the British Nationalist Party collapsed, right? And then UKIP collapsed, right? Largely because of Nigel Farage, right? But now Estonia has a white nationalist party in power because that's what EKRE are. They're a white nationalist party, so they're I'm totally against them, and I'm totally against black nationalism, right, as well. Right? But so it's coming from both sides. They've and this extremism, I don't know what's driving it. I think it's the internet. I think it's also the mainstream media. They enjoy conflict. I'll give you an example. I might be wrong about this, but I think this is what's happened. I got a call from Postmates, and they asked me to do a debate with somebody from the other side on Black Lives Matter. Um, uh, and this person is a personal friend, right? And someone I looked to, I asked for advice on things that are going on in my personal life. Right? We just don't agree on this issue, right? And I wrote back to Postmates. You do realize that this person is my good friend. Never heard back from them. So I'm thinking they wanted a conflict, right? Two people arguing with each other. They didn't want two friends having a fair debate. Yeah. And this is what's driving this. This is it's the way that the algorithms work in across the internet. It's pulling out the ugliest side of people, right? Because the conflict generates traffic, which leads to more sales, and that's making people angrier and angrier on both sides, right? Right. So that's not what have two friends having a debate and disagreeing on it is not what people are looking for. They want anger, right? And so if you write a post where you say I don't believe in this Black Lives Matter movement, it will immediately go to the most extreme. It will come into their inbox. Did you see what this person said? Right? It's spread across the internet, not just in Estonia, but in other parts of the world, right? Right. So um, I think that's what's happening. I think a lot of it is driven by the internet and by the way that the algorithms work. Right? A lot of this unpleasantness.
Absolutely. And also, I've noticed this on Twitter, as I said before, that you have like seemingly 15-year-old girls who weren't political, I don't know, 1 month ago, absolutely non-political people. Now they have like a Black Lives Matter and all cops are bastards in their Twitter bios, like these young girls, and they're like massively sharing this content. And of course, there is this aspect I have understood that if you are a teenage girl in your class, all your classmates are doing this, and you refuse to go along with it, you will essentially be like cyberbullied. Like,
Mm.
why aren't you posting this content? So it's quite disturbing.
Well, I mean, teenagers are the way they are. I mean, I used to teach teenagers, and I remember the last election, I was teaching a class, and I was teaching about American politics. This was when Trump was standing for election, and at first they were not interested. They were like, "Why are you teaching us about politics and American politics?" Well, we don't want to know, right? And a few months later, they were so interested, and they'd forgotten that they weren't interested before, right? Right. And I said, wait a second, you guys are all shouting at each other now, and you forgotten that you weren't interested, yeah? Right. And so that's exactly what you're saying, right? So um, 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 in terms of saying that most of the demonstrators in Tallinn were young white people. Well, that's a given because Estonia is a overwhelmingly white nation. But what I found in what I find is that these demonstrations across Europe are really about solidarity with other white people, right? Um, rather than solidarity with black people, because you don't find this happening in African countries or in Asian countries where people are actually black and brown, right? There have been either tiny demonstrations or no demonstrations at all. I mean, why aren't they demonstrating in New Delhi? It's a huge city. It has a Britain's colonial past. Right? There are a lot of people in India who know people in the UK, and there are certainly Indian people out in the streets in London. So why aren't they demonstrating in New Delhi? And they demonstrate about everything there. They demonstrate about a cricket match. They demonstrate about this TV show being cancelled or whatever. So yeah, well, they don't feel a need to feel as. It's not that they don't feel solidarity with black people or with anyone who's being ill-treated by the police. That's not true at all. It's simple. This is in an Estonian context. This is proving, well, we're like England, we're like Finland. But they had a Black Lives Matter in March in Finland. We have to have one in Tallinn, right? That's what was the driving factor in this, right? And you can feel that you're part of the West, part of you're like America or Australia or the UK, because people are out on the streets demonstrating in those countries. But those countries are different, right? Because they do have a large black population. Estonia doesn't, right? Um, and it is a fundamental difference, right? I mean, because police do have to police millions of black people. They don't have to do that in Estonia, right? Right. The police can have a personal relationship with the entire black community, right? Because the black community in Estonia is so small, right? Right. So they can literally know every single black person in Estonia and know who they are and what they're up to, right? So, oh, you're so and so, yeah, I know you, right? Right. That's not possible in Britain. It's not. Right? No, you can be stopped randomly by a policeman, and he has no idea who you are. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it is different, and people say, well, there's racism in Estonia. Well, there's racism everywhere, and there's in my experience, the countries where people are most racist are countries where people are not white. Right? I lived in Asia for many years, and Chinese people are the way they view black people is still in the 19th century, literally, right?
Oh yes, oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same if you go to India. I mean, I just commented on that, but and it's this, it's the same if you go to an Arab country, and so you're not going to change people's mind just by demonstrating. If there are racist people in Estonia, you going out on the streets and demonstrating is not going to, you're not accomplishing anything, right, by doing
Well, you could
all you are accomplishing is spreading disease. Right? That's all.
yes, and of course you can also like radicalize people in the different direction.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Mm.
that actually seems to be happening quite rapidly,
Yeah.
since
You
yeah.
just you make people angry, thinking, well, I've done that. Well, screw it then. I'm going to be EKRE now, right? Yeah. So it's radicalizing people in the other direction. It's not helping. It makes you feel like you're. You say these young girls, it makes you feel like you're important and you're doing something. Well, how about fixing your own life? How about cleaning your bedroom, as Jordan Peterson says. Um, um, and fixing yourself before you go out and try and fix the world, right? Yeah. That's
Mm.
that's what I think.
Well, just to pick up from your previous idea, like, well, I personally I don't have this view that EKRE is in total like a white nationalist party, but that's not really important what I think about it. But I wanted to just grasp this idea that we're trying to show solidarity, or these protesters are trying to show solidarity with like Western Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that for me, for a lot of people who are like westernized, let's say Estonians who work in the UK, for instance, like the one of the organizers of this protest was actually a woman who is working at TransferWise in London. I think she's been living there for like 13 years. She even said in an interview that she had forgotten a lot of the Estonian language since she had been away from Estonia for so long. And I suspect that these people have a sort of like inferiority complex as like Eastern Europeans, and they have to like really prove themselves to be whereas Western as you are. So they have this extra incentive to sort of try to save the reputation of Estonia in Western eyes or something like that.
Well,
It seems to be a factor.
You know that better than me, yeah. And I think, you could be right about that. But as I say, you'd understand that better than I would.
I definitely sense this. Well, yeah, since we've always tried to be part of the Nordics and part of whatever, like the Western sphere, and we have this total phobia of being called Eastern Europeans, which we obviously are. We obviously are Eastern Europeans. It's a very accurate term. Maybe I would ask you also, as you know, again, the local, let's say, Black community in Estonia maybe better than I do. Of course, you know it better than I do. Do people like foreign students here, the stereotype like the boat courier who during the day he studies at Tallinn University and then he does a side job as a courier. How do these people describe their experience to you, like privately or whatever? Like, do they sense like racism or?
Varies. Some of them are very fond of Estonia, and some of them complain. And some of them supported demonstration, and some of them were against it. At first, I thought that the majority of people who were kind of against it demonstration, but I actually don't know, because the ones who are for it are extremely vocal. Well, at least to me. Right? So it varies. I always have to keep in mind that for Black people in Estonia is their first impression of Europe, right? So they're coming across issues that they maybe not come across before. Also, it has to be said that Africans are not treated as well as Western Blacks in Estonia. That is an issue, right? I mean, I found that all over the world. I mean, but there is a difference in the way you get treated as a Western Black from Britain or America or France than if the way you get treated if you're from an African country. There's no denying that. They're just not treated as well by members of the public, right? And so they have a legitimate complaint there.
You've also talked about in some articles about the Estonian citizenship policy, for instance, and And how would you say the situation is right now? I understand that we don't have this double citizenship option really available, and
Yeah, well,
how is the
you know, it's a problem for me because it's something that I would like. I mean, I don't absolutely need it, right? Because I have already have my permanent residency in Estonia, and I have British citizenship, right? So should count for something. But it would be something that would be nice to have, you know, because I have a certain commitment to the country, and yeah, you know, it just would be nice to have it. And that's really all I can say about that. But there are a lot of people who do need it, right? And actually, it's quite impossible for even for black people or even white people who come from other countries to be treated as equally because they can't get Estonian citizenship without having to give up the citizenship of the country they're from, right? Right. So that is that is a concern for them.
But just let's talk in terms of like integration in general. Like, are there enough resources, for instance, to learn Estonian for an immigrant in Estonia? How is the general possibility of integrating well into society here, in your opinion?
Ma vahetan eesti keelest praegu. Ma arvan, et tegelikult eesti keel, kui inimesed tahavad eesti keelt õppida, see ei ole nii lihtne. Põhiliselt probleem ei ole A1 või A2 tase. Põhimõtteliselt probleeme on intermediate level kasutamiseks. See on probleem minu jaoks ka. Aga et ma elasin Eestis juba 10-aastane, ma arvan, et minu eesti keele tase on nii madal enam teiste inimestel. Aga ma oskan lugeda päris hästi, ma oskan kirjutada päris hästi ka, päris hea. Ja hetkel mul ei ole võimalust kasutada, siis ma olen Inglismaal. Ja mulle meeldib eesti keelt, muidugi, mulle meeldib eesti kultuur. Ma loen eesti romaanid ja ma näin Eesti, ma vaatan Eesti filmi ja telesaateid ja kõik. Ja see on minu huvi. I'll switch back to English now. As I said, the main problem is the intermediate level. That is really difficult to get from intermediate to advanced. That's the main problem that foreigners have. Right? They can get to intermediate level, but to get to advanced, it's really difficult. And that's the main problem that foreigners have in Estonia, I think. But most of us, if we're there for a few years, we will be at intermediate level. I would say most of us.
Yeah, I remember I knew a guy from Sweden who had lived in Estonia for a while, and he spoke really good English and good Estonian. I mean, and I asked him like, how did you achieve this? And he said that he had gone to the bar Savod in Tartu. Maybe you know the bar. Like straight for 6 months every day he went to Savod, and he just told people, you have to talk Estonian to me. Like I refuse to speak in English, and so he like brute forced his way into somehow speaking the language. But yeah, it's of course it's the hardest thing I understand is to reach the highest like sort of level on it. All right. Maybe I would ask you also, like, as you're a member of the Brexit Party, what would you recommend to EKRE? Like, how should EKRE reform
Well,
itself?
yeah, I mean, yeah, they're not alike at all. They're like day and night, and there's nothing I want to recommend to EKRE because I don't like them. I don't want anything to do with them. Right? Um, it doesn't mean that I dislike their supporters because I know that a lot of good people do support EKRE, but I think they're being deceived, just like the good people who support the Black Lives Matter movement are being deceived. Even some people who are in the party who are, active in EKRE are good people who are being deceived, just as some of the people who are, as I said, I have a personal friend who's a Black Lives Matter. He was one of the organizers, right? And but she's been deceived by this movement, right? And so the problem there is the leadership. Martin Helmer is a white nationalist. He's someone who particularly doesn't like African people, which is very unfortunate because most white nationalist movements are primarily they're anti-Semitic, and then everything else is incidental, right? Okay, Muslims are in Europe now, black people are Muslim now, but who's to blame for it? The Jews, right? Whereas in Martin Helmer's case, he's got a particular hatred of African people of African descent, and everything else is incidental. And you can see that very carefully if you look at the coalition agreement, right? It specifically mentions that to cut down on the anti-Semitic rhetoric, right? But it doesn't mention cut down on the anti-black rhetoric, right? Because there are people in EKRE who are quite anti-Semitic as well, right? But they're not the leadership, right? Right. So that makes it, a very unpleasant situation for the black community in Estonia and for everybody who's a minority there, indeed everybody who's not Estonian, right? Because they are a white nationalist party, and despite you say they're not, they are. Right?
We can disagree on that.
We can disagree on that, yeah, and this is coming from people I know who are in the party, right? No, yeah, so I can't say who they are, but that's what they tell me. Yeah, and so that makes them quite different to. I mean, no, they're. It's not a pleasant situation. It's not pleasant that they're in power. No, I oppose EKRE, and it's not a happy situation at all.
So what I gather from what you said is that essentially you do support, of course, like the fundamentally like nationalist populist party. I understand like the style of Brexit party, but what would the solution be for you? I don't know, maybe an alternative party, a new party who would be take more of the Brexit party line and less of the EKRE line, or something like that.
Like I said, EKRE are a bait and switch. I mean, populism is a reaction, or I see it as a reaction to corporatism, right? Because I think what happened is that a few years ago, big corporations figured out that you can control elections and you can decide who's in power, right? And you can fix elections, right? And you could buy the U.S. presidency, for example, right? And then Trump came along, and they found out that actually you can't buy the U.S. president. And populism is a reaction to corporations trying to control democracy. Yeah? And so there is a place for it, but it can go too far because it can disintegrate into mob rule, as we're seeing, right? Right. So there is a place for populism, I think, both on the left and on the right, so long as it doesn't disintegrate into mob rule, right? Which is what we're seeing. Now, the populist movement in Britain really was to get Britain out of the EU, and once that had been achieved, I think that should really be an end to it. Estonia is different. I don't support Estonia leaving the EU. Britain, I didn't even support Britain leaving the EU until we had the vote on it, and then I thought the vote should be respected, because if we don't respect the vote, then we're not a democracy. And that was why I changed my mind. The vote itself changed my mind. Also, Britain has the option of strengthening its relationship with the Commonwealth, Estonia doesn't have a Commonwealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so it has no option but to, stay in the EU. Right. So populism, British style, is different. And if you press Martin Helmer on should Estonia leave the EU or not, you won't get a straight answer. You won't say yes or no. Right? He will just ramble on for 10 minutes. Right? But he won't say yes or no. It's a yes or no question, but you won't get a straight answer, right? Because that's not really his focus. Right? His focus is on driving everybody out of the country who isn't Estonian.
All right. Yeah, of course. If you ask me, I'm leaning towards leaving the EU personally because this last insane loan plan that they are now pushing, the Commission is pushing, like a trillion euros.
I didn't know about that. Right? Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, it's the idea is to essentially give the Commission the power to take loans in the name of the entire union.
Oh yes, I have it. Yeah.
So that's I think it is going in a very, very wrong direction, very fast. But well, yeah, that's just my personal opinion. I think we could wrap it up. We've spoken for half and quarter of an hour. Is there anything that you would like to also emphasize as we draw this close? What you would like to get across a message?
Well, I hope people don't feel that how should I put this? That I shouldn't be doing this interview with you guys because you're a conservative platform that has some views that I don't agree with, because I believe in freedom of speech, and I think everybody has a right to say what they want to say in a civil way, which is what we've done, right? And that's why I agreed to do, this interview, because I knew it would be civil, right? And you've assured me that you're going to record the whole thing and publish it unedited.
Absolutely,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, which would be fine. And I hope that people will forgive me for my horrible Estonian. Yeah, but that's
all right.
it.
All right, but thanks very much, Abdul, for doing this interview, and I hope we will maybe speak again in the future.
All right.
So, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.